The revolutionary AI engine driving Eternal Horizon isn't just game-changing, it's industry-defining, announced Carson Wright, VP of Development at Nexus Games, gesturing dramatically at the gameplay demo on the massive screen behind him. With adaptive learning systems that literally evolve based on player behavior, we're creating NPCs that are indistinguishable from human players. I sat in the back of the crowded presentation room, watching as my code, my algorithms, my neural network architecture, my 3 years of obsessive refinement was presented to the biggest gaming conference in the industry as Carson's brainchild. Each feature he highlighted with practiced enthusiasm was something he had previously dismissed as unnecessarily complex or academically interesting but commercially impractical. My name is Maya Patel, and this is the story of how the gaming industry's most anticipated AI system became the centerpiece of a reckoning no one at Nexus Games saw coming, least of all Carson Wright. As journalists scribbled notes and industry executives leaned forward in their seats, Carson fielded questions with the smooth confidence of someone who'd spent years immersed in AI development rather than the reality. A business school graduate who couldn't write a line of code to save his life. The most remarkable breakthrough, he was saying now, is how our proprietary emotion mapping algorithms create NPCs with genuine emotional responses. They remember player interactions, form relationships, and even develop grudges based on past behavior. A tech journalist from GameWire raised her hand. Can you explain more about how the emotion mapping system is architecturally different from existing AI models? Carson's smile flickered just momentarily as he ventured into technical territory. Well, it's quite complex, but essentially we've developed a multi-layered neural network that he launched into a word salad of technical jargon, most of it either misused or nonsensical. I winced, watching the more knowledgeable attendees exchange glances. The system he was butchering the explanation of had been my doctoral research project before Nexus recruited me, a specialized approach to artificial emotional intelligence that had initially been met with skepticism by the academic community for being too ambitious. Perhaps your technical lead could elaborate, suggested the journalist, clearly recognizing the smoke and mirrors. Dr. Patel is more of a behind-the-scenes person, Carson replied smoothly, not even glancing in my direction. Brilliant with code, but these industry events really require someone who can communicate the vision to a broader audience. Translation: Maya doesn't look or sound like what the gaming industry expects from a visionary leader. When the presentation ended to enthusiastic applause, I slipped out before Carson could spot me. Back in my hotel room, I opened my laptop and reviewed the private repository where I'd documented every step of Eternal Horizon's AI development for the past 3 years. Every algorithm, every failed experiment, every breakthrough, all meticulously recorded with timestamps, progress notes, and video logs of key milestones. Most importantly, I had documentation of every instance where Carson had dismissed my approaches, only to later present them as his own insights to the executive team. Every email where he had taken credit for my work. Every meeting recording where he had misrepresented my research. I scrolled to a particular entry from 9 months ago. My presentation of the emotional memory architecture that was now the centerpiece of Eternal Horizon's marketing. Carson had called it unnecessarily complex and feature creep. 3 weeks later, he had presented the exact same architecture to the board as his own strategic innovation. My phone lit up with a text from Lynn, our lead environment artist and one of the few people at Nexus who knew the truth about who was really driving the AI development. Asterisk that was painful to watch. His explanation of your emotional mapping system literally made no sense. What are you going to do, asterisk? I stared at the message for a long moment. I had been asking myself that question for months, carefully documenting everything while trying to decide how to proceed. Today's presentation, watching Carson completely misrepresent my life's work to the entire industry, had finally crystallized my decision. Asterisk, remember Project Phoenix we talked about? It's time, asterisk. Project Phoenix wasn't just a contingency plan. It was a completely separate implementation of my AI architecture, one that was even more advanced than what I'd built for Nexus. I had developed it in parallel, on my own time, using my own equipment, carefully ensuring I wasn't violating any IP agreements with Nexus. The key algorithms were structurally different but functionally superior, designed from the ground up to avoid any potential legal entanglements. The following morning, as industry insiders filed into the main conference hall for the second day of presentations, I noticed a commotion near the central demo stations. A crowd had gathered around a previously unannounced booth where a stunning game demo was running. The logo simply read Phoenix Interactive. I smiled to myself, right on schedule. The demo showed a vast alien landscape where players interacted with NPCs displaying emotional intelligence so natural and responsive that it made Eternal Horizons' much-hyped AI look primitive by comparison. A sign above the booth proclaimed, "The real next generation of gaming AI." Developed by Dr. Maya Patel, former lead AI architect at Nexus Games. My phone buzzed almost immediately with a text from Carson. What the hell is this? Get to the Nexus booth now. I took my time walking across the convention center, watching as word spread and more people flocked to the Phoenix Interactive demo. By the time I reached Nexus Games' elaborate booth, Carson was pacing like a caged animal, his face flushed with anger. "What have you done?" he hissed, pulling me aside. "You violated your contract, your NDA, everything. We'll sue you into oblivion." "I haven't violated anything," I replied calmly, loud enough for nearby industry representatives to hear. Phoenix Interactive's AI architecture is built on principles I developed before joining Nexus, with completely different implementation. I've been very careful about that. "No one will believe that," he snapped. "Everyone knows Eternal Horizons AI is groundbreaking." "Is it?" I raised an eyebrow. "Or is Eternal Horizon using an inferior version of my work that you repeatedly rejected before claiming it as your own?" His eyes widened slightly. "That's absurd. I've led the AI development from the beginning." "Have you?" I pulled out my phone and played a brief clip. Carson in a development meeting 8 months ago, dismissing the exact emotional mapping system he had presented yesterday as his own innovation. The color drained from his face. "Where did you get that?" "Recording meetings is against company policy. Documentation is actually my specialty," I replied. "I have 3 years of evidence showing how my work was systematically appropriated and misrepresented. Every algorithm you claimed credit for, every feature you initially rejected, then presented as your insight." Before Carson could respond, a tall figure approached us, Elijah Nakamura, CEO of Nakamura Entertainment, one of the largest publishers in the industry. "Dr. Patel," he said, extending his hand. "I just saw your Phoenix demo. Remarkable work. Much more impressive than what was presented yesterday." He glanced meaningfully at Carson, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. "Thank you, Mr. Nakamura," I replied, shaking his hand. "I'd like to discuss potential publishing arrangements for Phoenix Interactive," he continued, "and perhaps clarify some confusion about the development history of Eternal Horizons AI systems." By midday, the convention was buzzing with rumors. The mysterious Phoenix Interactive booth was drawing crowds away from major publishers. Industry journalists were asking pointed questions about Carson's role in Eternal Horizons development, and Nexus Games stock had dropped 7% since market opening. That afternoon, I received a message requesting my presence at an emergency meeting in Nexus Games' private conference room at the convention center. When I arrived, I found the company's entire executive leadership team, along with their legal counsel. CEO Margaret Chen got straight to the point. "Dr. Patel, we've reviewed some concerning evidence regarding Eternal Horizons development and Mr. Wright's role in it." Carson sat stone-faced at the far end of the table, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. "Several major publishers have approached us today with troubling questions," she continued. "Questions that suggest you have documentation regarding the true development history of our AI systems." I nodded. "I've documented everything meticulously from day one." "May we see this documentation?" I opened my laptop and presented a carefully prepared summary, emails, meeting recordings, code repository logs, all demonstrating the systematic pattern of my work being appropriated by Carson. The room fell silent as the executives reviewed the evidence. The legal counsel looked increasingly troubled. "This creates significant liability for the company," he finally said, "especially given yesterday's public presentation and the marketing materials already distributed." Margaret Chen's expression was unreadable as she turned to Carson. "What do you have to say about this?" "It's a mischaracterization," he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, Dr. Patel contributed to the development, but the vision and direction were mine. I played another clip. Carson in his own words. Asterisk, I don't really understand all this neural network stuff. But if you can make it work, great. Just make it simple enough that I can explain it to the board. Asterisk. His face flushed deep red. Margaret Chen had heard enough. Carson, wait outside, please. After he left, she turned to me. What exactly do you want, Dr. Patel? Recognition for my work, I replied simply, and to ensure this doesn't happen to other developers. And Phoenix Interactive is built on different architecture than what I developed for Nexus. I've been very careful about that. I'm happy to have it independently verified. A long discussion followed involving technical details, legal considerations, and practical business realities. By the time we emerged 3 hours later, we had reached an agreement that would change everything. The next morning, the gaming industry woke to a shocking press release. Many ex-US damies ANNONC's LED Euroshapi changes and NUDU direction. Dr. Maya Patel appointed Chief Technology Officer and Creative Director of AI Development. Carson Wright no longer with the company. Partnership announced with Phoenix Interactive to develop next-generation gaming AI. The final day of the conference featured a new presentation on Eternal Horizon, this time with me at the podium, explaining the actual technical innovations behind the game's AI systems. I answered questions with precise technical detail, demonstrating a command of the subject that made the previous presentation look like a bad parody. When asked about Phoenix Interactive, I explained that my independent research would now be integrated with Nexus Games development in a formal partnership arrangement that properly credited the original work. The most exciting innovations happen when developers are empowered to pursue their vision without fear of having their contributions erased. I told the packed auditorium. Nexus Games is committed to becoming that kind of company. 6 months later, Eternal Horizon launched to critical acclaim, praised particularly for its revolutionary AI systems that created the most believable and emotionally responsive NPCs ever seen in gaming. My name featured prominently in reviews, interviews, and industry analysis. Carson Wright had disappeared from the gaming industry entirely. Last I heard, he was trying to rebrand himself as an ad consultant in another field, presumably one where the technical people were less likely to document everything. As I walked through the Nexus Games office, now restructured with a significantly more diverse leadership team, I passed a wall displaying our core values, recently revised after the convention incident. At the top of the list, credit where credit is due. In my new corner office, with its view of the Seattle skyline, I kept a small framed snippet of code on my wall. The first algorithm I'd written for what would become Eternal Horizon's emotional mapping system. Below it was a quote I'd added. Your work speaks for itself, but sometimes it needs your voice too. The gaming industry had learned an important lesson. Technical brilliance doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it sits quietly in the back of the room, documenting everything, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the truth. And as I mentored younger developers, particularly women and minorities who often found their contributions minimized or appropriated, I made sure they understood. Sometimes the most powerful code you write isn't what goes into the game. It's the undeniable record of your own brilliance that no one can erase or claim as their own. Because in development, as in life, the most important thing isn't just creating something revolutionary. It's ensuring that the true source code of innovation is recognized and preserved.